The champagne was Dom Perignon. I know because I picked it out myself. 47 bottles at $215 each, charged to the same American Express Platinum that had my name embossed in silver letters on the front. I remember standing in the wine shop on Madison Avenue 3 weeks earlier, telling the sommelier I wanted something elegant but not pretentious for a corporate holiday party. He'd smiled and said, "You can't go wrong with Dom." He was wrong. You absolutely can. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me paint you the picture first, because I need you to see what I saw. December 14th, a Friday. The rooftop event space at the Langford Hotel in downtown Chicago, booked 7 weeks in advance. By me. The deposit was $18,000. The catering was another $32,000. The DJ, the photographer, the custom ice sculpture shaped like our company logo. All me. Every vendor had my credit card on file. Every invoice came to my email. I organized the seating chart. I approved the playlist. I even picked the napkin color, ivory with gold trim, because my husband said it matched the brand aesthetic. My husband, Brandon. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. That was the whole point, I'd realize later. I was supposed to be in Phoenix, visiting my mother who'd just had knee replacement surgery. I'd booked the flight 2 months ago. Brandon knew. Everyone at the company knew. Ashley, that's my stepsister, his executive assistant, she knew too. But Mom's surgery got pushed to the following Monday due to a scheduling conflict with her surgeon. So I changed my flight to Saturday morning instead, which meant Friday night I was still in Chicago, which meant I had no reason not to stop by the party I'd spent $67,000 of our money putting together. I took an Uber from our apartment in Lincoln Park. I wore the emerald green Valentino dress Brandon had bought me for our 5th anniversary. I even curled my hair. I thought I'd surprise him, have a glass of champagne, maybe slow dance to whatever the DJ was playing. I thought it would be romantic. The elevator opened onto the rooftop at 9:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I glanced at my phone right before the doors parted. There was a text from my mom. "Have fun tonight, sweetheart. Give Brandon my love." The first thing I noticed was the silence. 200 people on a rooftop in December, and nobody was talking. Everyone was standing in a wide semicircle near the railing, where the city skyline glittered behind them. Phones were out. People were recording. The second thing I noticed was Brandon, center of the circle, down on one knee. And the third thing, the thing that made my knees actually buckle, that made the floor tilt sideways, that made every single sound in the world go muffled like someone had shoved cotton into my ears, was who he was kneeling in front of. Ashley, my stepsister, in a red dress I'd never seen before, both hands pressed over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. And on her left hand, already on her finger, because she'd clearly already said yes, was a ring, a diamond ring, bigger than mine. I stood there in the elevator doorway for what felt like 11 years, but was probably 4 seconds. Nobody had seen me yet. The crowd was facing away. Brandon was saying something, his voice carrying across the rooftop in fragments. Been waiting for this moment, and the love of my life, and start our future together. Our future. He said our future to her, while wearing the tie I'd ironed that morning. But that moment, that frozen, airless, impossible moment, isn't where this story starts. Not really. To understand how I ended up standing in that elevator with a $67,000 party happening around my husband's proposal to another woman, you need to go back, way back, to when everything was good. To when I was happy and stupid and believed that the life I'd built was actually mine. 3 years earlier, I was 31 years old and convinced I was the luckiest woman in Illinois. I'd married Brandon Calloway when I was 28 after a whirlwind 14-month courtship that felt like something out of a romantic comedy. We met at a fundraiser for the Chicago Children's Hospital. He was there representing his father's logistics company, Callaway Freight Solutions, and I was there because my firm had designed the event branding. I was a senior graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing agency. Good job. Not glamorous, but solid. I had a 401k, a decent credit score, and a one-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park that I'd furnished entirely from West Elm during their annual sale. Brandon was charming. That's the word everyone used. My friends, my mother, my coworkers who stalked his LinkedIn after our first date. He's so charming, Jen. My name is Jennifer, by the way. Jennifer Hadley. Well, Jennifer Hadley Callaway for a while. But we'll get to that. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in any room. Eye contact that never wavered. Questions that proved he'd actually been listening. On our third date, he remembered that I'd mentioned my grandmother's lemon cake recipe in passing, and he'd bought a vintage cake stand from an antique shop in Evanston. For when you bake it for me someday. I melted. I absolutely melted. We got married at a vineyard in Napa Valley. 82 guests. My mom cried through the entire ceremony. Brandon's father, Richard, gave a toast about legacy and partnership and how a strong marriage was the foundation of a strong business. At the time, I thought it was sweet, if a little corporate. Later, I'd understand it was a mission statement. Because here's the thing about marrying into the Callaway family. The business wasn't separate from the marriage. It was the marriage. Callaway Freight Solutions was a regional logistics company that Richard had built from a single truck and a handshake in 1987. By the time I met Brandon, it had grown to a $14 million annual revenue operation with 200 employees, a fleet of 60 trucks, and contracts with 3 major retail chains. Brandon was the COO. Richard was the CEO, but had been talking about retirement since his second heart attack in 2019. 6 months after our wedding, Richard sat us both down in his office, wood-paneled, smelled like cigars and old leather, and told us his plan. He was stepping back. Brandon would take over as CEO. And because Richard believed in family equity, he was restructuring the ownership. Here's where it gets important, so pay attention. Richard transferred 60% of the company's shares into a family trust. Brandon got 30% in his name, and me, because Richard said I was part of the family now, and family means skin in the game, I received 10% of the shares, directly in my name, not through Brandon, not through the trust, mine. I remember signing the papers at the attorney's office, a notary stamping each page, and thinking this was almost too generous. I said as much to Richard. He waved me off. You're going to earn every fraction of those shares, Jennifer. Trust me. He wasn't wrong. Within a year, I'd left my design job to work full-time for Callaway Freight. Not because Brandon asked, because the company needed me. Their branding was stuck in 1994. Their website looked like it was built on GeoCities. Their social media presence was non-existent. I redesigned everything. New logo, new website, new marketing strategy. I negotiated a partnership with a digital advertising firm that increased their inbound leads by 40% in 8 months. I also handled something nobody else wanted to touch: the company's finances for events, client entertainment, and corporate retreats. Brandon hated that stuff. You're so much better at the detail work, he'd say, kissing my forehead. So I managed budgets, vendor relationships, catering contracts. I became the unofficial chief everything officer. And I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. Our apartment in Lincoln Park was a 3-bedroom with exposed brick and a view of the park. We had a French bulldog named Otis who snored like a freight train. On Sunday mornings, Brandon made pancakes while I read the Tribune at the kitchen island. We talked about having kids. Maybe next year. Always next year. But it felt like a promise, not a deflection. Then there was Ashley. My stepsister came into my life when I was 14. My mom married her father, Greg, after meeting him at a church potluck in Naperville. Greg was quiet, kind, a high school math teacher. Ashley was 12, shy, with braces and a collection of horse figurines that covered every surface in her bedroom. We shared a bathroom and fought over mirror time and eventually became something like friends. Not best friends, we were too different for that, but close enough. Ashley was always the pretty one. I don't say that with bitterness, or at least I didn't used to. She had this effortless beauty that made people stop and look. Blonde hair that fell in natural waves, green eyes, a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. By college, she'd done some modeling. Nothing major, local department store catalogs, a billboard for a dental office, but enough to give her a confidence that I quietly envied. She bounced between jobs for most of her 20s. Retail, waitressing, a brief stint as a real estate agent that ended when she failed to pass the licensing exam the second time. When she called me crying about it, 26 years old, broke, living in a studio apartment in Schaumburg with a cat named Duchess, I felt genuinely sorry for her. So when Brandon mentioned he needed a new executive assistant because his current one was going on maternity leave, I suggested Ashley. Let that sink in because I still can't say it without feeling like I swallowed glass. She's organized, she's personable, she needs a break, I told Brandon over dinner one night. He shrugged and said, "If you vouch for her, that's good enough for me." Ashley started at Callaway Freight in March, 2 years before the rooftop. She was grateful, effusively, almost embarrassingly grateful. She brought me flowers on her first day. She texted me every night for the first week. "Thank you so much, Jen. I literally owe you my life." She was good at the job, too. Punctual, detail-oriented, quick to learn the systems. Brandon said she was a godsend. Those were his exact words. For a while, everything hummed along. The company was growing. We landed a massive contract with a national home goods retailer that added $3.2 million in annual revenue. Brandon was featured in a Chicago Business Journal article about next-gen logistics leaders. I framed it and hung it in his office. I was proud of him, proud of us, proud of what we'd built together. But there was a moment, small, barely anything, that I've replayed 1,000 times since. It was a Thursday evening, maybe 8 months before the party. I'd come by the office to drop off dinner for Brandon because he was working late. His door was closed, which wasn't unusual. I knocked and opened it at the same time, the way you do when you're married to someone and their office feels like an extension of your home. Brandon was at his desk. Ashley was perched on the edge of it, leaning in, her hand resting on his forearm. They were laughing about something. When I walked in, Ashley pulled her hand back. Not fast, not like she'd been caught, but deliberately, slowly, like she wanted me to see it before she moved it. "Jen, hey," Brandon said, standing up too quickly. Ashley was just going over the Hensley account notes. "At 8:30 at night," I said. I meant it as a joke. Mostly. Ashley smiled at me, that perfect wind chime smile. "You know your husband," she said. "Workaholic. I keep telling him to go home to you." I handed Brandon the bag of Thai food. He kissed my cheek. Ashley gathered her things and left with a little wave. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and tried to name the feeling sitting in my chest. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more like the sensation you get when you're driving and you hit a patch of black ice. That split second where the steering wheel goes light in your hands and you realize you might not be in control of where you're going. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Ashley was my stepsister. Brandon was my husband. We were family. I rolled over, closed my eyes, and let it go. That was my first mistake. My second mistake was worse. I talked myself out of every red flag for the next 7 months. It happened gradually, the way rot works inside a wall, invisible until the whole structure sags. Little things. Brandon started locking his phone. He'd never done that before. We'd been the kind of couple who used each other's phones without thinking. He'd grab mine to look up a restaurant. I'd use his to call my mom when mine was dead. Then, one Saturday morning in April, I picked up his iPhone to check the weather, and it asked for a passcode. "Since when do you have a lock code?" I asked. He didn't look up from his laptop. "IT policy. Company phones need a 6-digit passcode now. Security compliance thing." That sounded reasonable. Callaway Freight had been upgrading its systems. I'd even signed off on some of those IT contracts myself. So I nodded and handed the phone back and didn't think about it again. Until 3 weeks later, when I heard his phone buzz on the nightstand at 11:40 p.m. Brandon was in the shower. I glanced over, not snooping, just a reflex, and saw the notification on the lock screen before it disappeared. Ashley, can't stop thinking about today. My stomach dropped. Not fell, dropped like an elevator with cut cables. I stared at the dark screen and tried to construct an innocent explanation. Maybe they'd had a productive workday. Maybe Ashley was being her usual effusive, emoji-heavy self. She was like that. She once texted me a string of 17 heart emojis because I recommended a good podcast. Brandon came out of the bathroom in a towel, saw me sitting up in bed, and smiled. "You're still awake?" "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Come here." He climbed into bed, pulled me close, kissed my temple. He smelled like cedar soap and toothpaste. He felt warm and solid and mine. I didn't mention the text. That was the second mistake. The third, fourth, and fifth mistakes all blurred together over the summer. Brandon started working late 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. He said the National Home Goods contract was demanding, fulfillment issues, routing problems, driver shortages. And that was true. I could see the numbers. Revenue was up, but so were operational headaches. So when he came home at 10 p.m. smelling like a restaurant instead of an office, I told myself he'd grab dinner with a client. In August, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket while taking it to the dry cleaner. Alinea, the tasting menu. 2 guests, $487 before tip, dated a Tuesday. A Tuesday he'd told me he was doing inventory at the warehouse in Joliet. I held that receipt for a long time. Standing in our walk-in closet, Otis snoring on the bedroom floor behind me, sunlight cutting through the window. $487 at Alinea. I'd been wanting to go there for 2 years. Every time I brought it up, Brandon said it was overpriced theater food, but I still didn't say anything. You know why? Because I was afraid. Not of the truth, of being wrong. Of being the jealous, paranoid wife who accused her husband of something terrible based on a restaurant receipt and a late-night emoji. I'd seen what that did to people. My college roommate's marriage imploded because she went through her husband's email and misread a conversation with his cousin. I didn't want to be that woman. So I swallowed it. I filed the receipt in a mental folder labeled "Things I'll Deal With Later" and went about my life. September brought the annual company retreat. 3 days at a resort in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. I'd planned the whole thing, naturally, booked the conference rooms, arranged the team-building activities, even organized a bonfire night with s'mores, because Brandon said it would boost morale. I drove up with Brandon on Thursday morning. Ashley rode with us. She sat in the back seat, chatting about a Netflix show, playing with her phone, occasionally catching my eye in the rearview mirror and smiling. Normal. Completely normal. Except at the resort, I noticed something. During the Friday afternoon breakout sessions, Brandon and Ashley kept ending up in the same small group. At dinner, she sat across from him instead of next to me. When we did the bonfire, the one I'd planned, she was on his left and I was on his right, and the two of them kept having these side conversations that dissolved into quiet laughter I wasn't part of. At one point, Karen Fisher, the company's HR director, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd worked for Richard since the early days, sat down next to me and said, low enough that only I could hear, "You doing okay, Jennifer?" "Of course," I said. "Why?" Karen looked at me for a beat too long. Then she patted my knee and said, "No reason." Just checking. That was the moment I should have grabbed Karen by the arm and said, "Tell me what you know." But the bonfire was crackling, and Brandon was suddenly turned toward me, handing me a perfectly golden marshmallow and saying, "Made this one just for you, babe." And the moment passed. Karen walked away. The fire popped. Ashley laughed at something on her phone. I got back to Chicago and did something I'm not proud of. I checked Brandon's email. Not his personal email, his company email, which I had access to because I was a shareholder and had admin credentials for the company's systems. I told myself I was checking on vendor invoices. That was a lie. I was looking for evidence. I found it in 14 seconds. An email from Ashley to Brandon sent at 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday, 3 weeks prior. Subject line, last night. The body of the email was 4 sentences. I know we said we'd be careful, but I don't want to be careful anymore. I want this. I want us. Just tell me when. Brandon's reply sent 9 minutes later. Soon, I promise. Just need to get some things in order first. I read those emails 17 times. I counted. 17. Each time hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something innocent. They didn't. My hands were shaking so badly I knocked my coffee off the desk. It splashed across a stack of invoices, and I just watched it spread, brown liquid bleeding through paper, and I didn't move. I sat there for 40 minutes. I know because my screensaver kicked in twice. Then I did something that surprises me to this day. I closed the email. I cleaned up the coffee. I drove home. And when Brandon walked in the door that evening, I made chicken parmesan and asked about his day and laughed at his story about a driver who accidentally delivered 40 pallets of paper towels to the wrong Walmart. I didn't confront him. Not because I was weak, though maybe I was, but because a cold, calculating part of my brain had clicked on like a fluorescent light in a dark room. If I confronted Brandon now, it would be chaos. Tears, denials, gaslighting. He'd delete everything. Ashley would play innocent, and I'd be left standing in the wreckage with nothing but a screenshot and a broken marriage. No. If this was happening, if my husband was sleeping with my stepsister, I needed to be strategic. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. Not just any divorce attorney. I called Linda Whitfield, a partner at Whitfield & Associates, who was known in Chicago legal circles as the surgeon, because she dissected unfaithful spouses with clinical precision. Her retainer was $15,000. I paid it from my personal savings account, the one Brandon didn't know about, funded by the quarterly dividends from my 10% company shares. Linda listened to everything. The emails, the late nights, the receipt from Alinea, Karen's cryptic comment. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Jennifer, she said, before we talk about divorce strategy, I need you to understand something. You own 10% of Callaway Freight Solutions outright. Your husband owns 30%. The remaining 60% is in a family trust. Do you know the terms of that trust? Richard set it up, I said. I think Brandon is the primary beneficiary. Find out, Linda said. Get me the trust documents, because if there's a dissolution clause or a morality provision, and a lot of family trusts have them, your husband's affair could change the entire math. I left Linda's office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly, more like purpose. I had a direction, a plan. For 2 weeks, I played the perfect wife. I smiled. I cooked. I kissed Brandon goodbye every morning and told him I loved him. I attended a company board meeting and sat next to Ashley and complimented her new earrings. Those are gorgeous, I said, and she beamed and said, Thanks, Jen. They were a birthday gift. And I thought, from my husband? Meanwhile, I was quietly gathering everything. Bank statements, credit card records, the company's financial reports. I found the trust documents in Richard's old filing cabinet at the office. He'd given me a key years ago, back when he trusted me with everything. I scanned them and sent them to Linda. And then, on November 28th, 2 weeks before the rooftop party, Linda called me. Jennifer, I've reviewed the trust. You need to sit down. I was already sitting, but I gripped the arm of my chair. The Callaway Family Trust has a morality clause, Linda said. Specifically, Section 14B states that if any beneficiary engages in conduct that causes material, reputational harm to the family or the business, including but not limited to adultery, fraud, or criminal behavior, the trustee has the authority to redistribute that beneficiary's shares. And who's the trustee? I asked. That's the interesting part, Linda said. Richard Calloway was the original trustee, but he amended the trust 18 months ago, right after his second heart attack. The successor trustee, effective upon Richard's incapacitation or voluntary resignation, is listed as... She paused. I could hear her flipping a page. You, Jennifer, you're the successor trustee. The room tilted. That can't be right. It's notarized and filed. Richard must have trusted you implicitly. I thought of Richard in his wood-paneled office, cigar smoke curling toward the ceiling, telling me I'd earn every fraction of those shares. I thought of him watching me redesign the company, manage the finances, hold things together while Brandon glad-handed clients and took credit. Richard knew. Maybe not about Ashley specifically, but he knew his son. He knew what Brandon was capable of, and he'd built a safety net, not for Brandon, but for the company, for me. So what does this mean? I whispered. It means, Linda said carefully, that if you can prove Brandon's affair constitutes material reputational harm, you have the legal authority to redistribute his 30% trust shares. Combined with your own 10%, that would give you controlling interest, 40%, versus whatever remains. I sat in silence for so long that Linda asked if I was still there. I'm here, I said. I'm just thinking. Don't think too long, she said. If Brandon finds out you know, he'll move first. Men like him always do. She was right. But I wasn't ready. I needed proof. Not emails, not receipts, not Karen Fisher's knowing look. I needed something undeniable. I got it 2 weeks later. At a party I paid for, on a rooftop in Chicago, in front of 200 witnesses with their phones out, recording my husband on one knee, proposing to my stepsister. Standing in that elevator doorway, watching the champagne I'd ordered catch the light as strangers toasted a love that was built on the wreckage of mine, I felt something shift inside me. Not break, shift. Like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. Brandon still hadn't seen me. Ashley was crying, showing the ring to a cluster of women from accounting. The DJ started playing At Last by Etta James. I stepped backward. The elevator doors closed, and as I rode down 42 floors to the lobby, I opened my phone and typed 2 texts. The first was to Linda Whitfield. I have my proof. Every phone in that room recorded it. Start everything tomorrow morning. The second was to the event coordinator at the Langford Hotel. This is Jennifer Hadley Calloway. Cancel all remaining charges to my card immediately. Every vendor, every invoice, every open tab. Effective now. Then I walked out into the December cold, hailed a cab, and went home to a dark apartment where a French bulldog named Otis was the only living thing still loyal to me. I didn't cry. Not yet. I had work to do. I didn't sleep that night, not a single minute. I sat on the living room floor in my Valentino dress with Otis in my lap, his warm body rising and falling against my stomach, and I stared at the wall until the shadows moved and the first gray light of Saturday morning crept through the windows. My phone was on the carpet next to me. I'd turned it to silent at 11 p.m. when the notifications started. The first text came from a number I didn't recognize. OMG, Jennifer, are you okay? I just saw the video. Then another, then 6 more. By midnight, my phone was vibrating every 30 seconds like a dying heartbeat. Someone had posted it. Of course someone had posted it. 200 people with smartphones, and all it takes is one. The video was on Facebook first, posted by a Callaway freight warehouse manager named Derek something, and then it jumped to Instagram, then TikTok. I didn't watch it. I couldn't. But the notifications told me everything. Brandon on one knee, Ashley crying, the crowd cheering, the champagne, my champagne, being popped in celebration. One comment under the Facebook video read, "Isn't he married, though?" It had 47 likes. By 6 a.m. Saturday, my phone had 112 unread messages. I scrolled through just the names. Co-workers, college friends, my aunt in Michigan, people I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly texting me with that specific combination of concern and curiosity that means they want to comfort you, but also want the gossip. Brandon didn't come home. Not Saturday morning, not Saturday afternoon. At 2 p.m., he sent me one text. "We need to talk. I'll come by tonight." We need to talk. 4 words. After 6 years of marriage, after everything I'd built, everything I'd funded, everything I'd sacrificed, 4 words and a period. Not even an exclamation mark. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I can explain." Just the flat corporate language of a man scheduling a meeting to discuss a personnel change. He showed up at 7 p.m. I heard his key in the lock and Otis ran to the door, tail wagging, because dogs don't understand betrayal. Brandon walked in wearing jeans and the gray cashmere sweater I'd bought him last Christmas. He looked tired. He did not look sorry. "Jen," he said, standing in the foyer like a guest. "Don't," I said. I was sitting at the kitchen island. I'd changed out of the Valentino dress and into sweatpants and a Northwestern hoodie. My hair was still curled from the night before, which felt obscene. "Don't say my name like we're about to have a reasonable conversation." He sighed. Actually sighed, like I was being difficult. "I know this isn't how you were supposed to find out," he said. "How was I supposed to find out, Brandon? A memo? A calendar invite? Were you going to put it in the company newsletter?" "I was going to tell you after the holidays. I had a plan." "A plan." I laughed, and it sounded like something breaking. "You proposed to my stepsister at a party I paid for, and you had a plan." He stepped closer. "Jen, listen to me. Ashley and I, this isn't some fling. This is real. We've been together for over a year. I love her, and I know that's hard to hear, but I owe you the truth." The truth. He said the truth like he was giving me a gift, like honesty was something he could hand over now, after a year of lies, and I should be grateful to receive it. "You owe me a lot more than the truth," I said quietly. "I know, and I want to be fair about this. I've already talked to a lawyer." "Of course you have. And we can do this amicably. We split the assets. I keep the company. You keep the apartment. It's clean." I stared at him. This man I'd loved. This man I'd built a company for. He was standing in my kitchen, in the sweater I bought him, offering me my own apartment like it was severance. "Get out," I said. "Jen, get out of this apartment, Brandon, right now." He left. He took a duffel bag from the closet, a bag he'd apparently already packed, which meant he'd planned this too, the logistics of leaving, and he walked out without looking back. Otis whined at the closed door for 20 minutes. That was Saturday night. Sunday was worse. My mother called at 8 a.m. She was crying before I even said hello. "Baby, someone sent me a video. Please tell me it's not real." I couldn't lie to her. I told her everything. The proposal, the affair, the emails. She went quiet for a long time, and then she said something that gutted me more than anything Brandon had done. "Ashley's father called me this morning. Greg says he had no idea. He's devastated, Jennifer. He keeps saying he's sorry." She paused. "But he also said, Ashley told him you and Brandon were already separated, that you'd been living apart for months. She told Greg you were okay with it." My stepsister had lied to her own father to make this palatable. She'd constructed a narrative where I was a willing participant in my own humiliation, where I'd stepped aside gracefully so she could have my husband. "Mom," I said, "I found out at the party, just like everyone else." The sound my mother made, I can't describe it. It was grief and rage compressed into a single exhale. After she hung up, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried for the first time. Not the gentle, cinematic crying you see in movies, the ugly kind. The kind where your whole body convulses and you can't breathe and snot runs down your face and you press your forehead against the cold tile because you need something solid to prove the world is still there. I cried until I threw up. Then I cried some more. Monday came and I realized the full scope of what was happening. My phone rang at 9:15 a.m. It was Tom Brennan, Callaway Freight's CFO. His voice was careful, measured. "Jennifer, I need to let you know that Brandon has called an emergency board meeting for Wednesday. He's proposing a restructuring of the company's leadership team and," he hesitated, "and the share structure." My blood went cold. What kind of restructuring? He wants to consolidate all family shares under a single holding entity. His argument is operational efficiency. But Jennifer, and I'm telling you this as a friend, not as a CFO, if that motion passes, your 10% gets folded into a structure he controls. You'd still technically own shares, but you'd have no independent voting power. Brandon wasn't just leaving me. He was erasing me, surgically removing every fingerprint I'd left on the company, every thread of ownership, every ounce of leverage. And he was doing it fast, Wednesday, 3 days away, because he knew that speed was his only advantage. "Tom," I said, "who's on his side?" Silence. Then, most of the board. He's been talking to them for weeks, maybe longer. Weeks. He'd been planning this for weeks. The proposal at the party wasn't spontaneous romance. It was a signal. A public declaration designed to establish Ashley as the new partner, the new face beside the CEO. And the board restructuring was the legal machinery behind it, already in motion before I ever stepped into that elevator. I hung up and called Linda Whitfield. "He's moving," I said. "Wednesday. Emergency board meeting to restructure the shares." Linda's voice was sharp. "Then we move faster. Jennifer, listen to me carefully. As successor trustee of the Callaway Family Trust, you have authority over the 60% held in that trust. Brandon's 30% is trust allocated, not personally owned. I confirmed this yesterday with the original filing. That means his shares are subject to the morality clause, and you, as trustee, are the one who invokes it. Can I do that before Wednesday? You can do it right now, today. All you need is documented evidence of conduct that constitutes material reputational harm. That video of him proposing to his secretary, your stepsister, at a company event while still legally married to you, that's not just evidence, Jennifer. That's a billboard. I sat at my kitchen island, Otis at my feet, a cup of cold coffee in my hand. Outside, Chicago was gray and sharp with December wind. Inside, something was clicking into place, gear by gear, tooth by tooth, like a lock being opened from the inside. "Tell me exactly what to do," I said. "First," Linda said, "we file the trustee action invoking Section 14B. I'll have the paperwork drafted within 2 hours. Second, we get a temporary restraining order blocking any changes to the company's share structure until the trustee review is complete. Third, and this is important, you need to secure every financial record you can access, bank accounts, vendor contracts, payroll records. If Brandon tries to move money before we lock this down, we need to prove it." "I have admin access to all the company systems," I said. "I set up half of them." "Then use it, today, before he thinks to revoke your credentials." I opened my laptop. My hands were steady now. The crying was done. The vomiting was done. The woman on the bathroom floor pressing her face to cold tile, she was still me, but she was receding, like a figure in a rearview mirror getting smaller with every mile. I logged into Callaway Freight's financial system at 11:47 a.m. on Monday, December 16th. I downloaded everything, every transaction, every contract, every payroll record going back 3 years. I found Brandon's corporate credit card statements and discovered $43,000 in charges over the past year that had nothing to do with business. Jewelry stores, luxury hotels, a weekend trip to Cabo San Lucas in September that he'd told me was a client meeting in Dallas. I exported it all, every receipt, every lie with a $sign attached. Then I called Karen Fisher. "Karen," I said, "it's Jennifer. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." A pause. Then, softly, "I wondered when you'd call. How long have you known?" "Since the retreat in Lake Geneva. I saw them. Not in a compromising position, exactly, but I saw the way he touched her when he thought nobody was looking, and I saw the way she looked at him." Karen's voice was steady, but sad. "I wanted to tell you, Jennifer. I almost did, at the bonfire, but it wasn't my place, and I was afraid of what Brandon would do if I got involved. Would you be willing to put that in writing?" Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear Karen breathing. "Yes," she said, "I would. Because what he did at that party, proposing to that girl in front of the whole company at an event you organized and paid for, that wasn't just an affair, Jennifer. That was cruelty. And I've worked for this company for 19 years, and I won't be silent about cruelty. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than pain. It wasn't warmth exactly. It was the feeling of not being completely alone. Thank you, Karen. Don't thank me yet, she said. Just tell me what you need. By Monday evening, Linda had filed the trustee action. By Tuesday morning, the restraining order blocking the board restructuring was granted by a Cook County judge. Brandon's emergency Wednesday meeting was dead before it started. I sat in my apartment that Tuesday night, documents spread across the kitchen island, laptop glowing, Otis snoring on the couch. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. What the hell did you do? My lawyer says there's an injunction. Call me. Now. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the counter. I didn't call him. I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Wednesday morning, Linda Whitfield called me at 7:02 a.m. I was already awake. I'd been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen island with my third cup of coffee, Otis curled at my feet, staring at the spreadsheet of every dollar Brandon had spent on Ashley over the past year. $43,000. Hotels, jewelry, restaurants, flights. Each line item was a lie with a timestamp. The injunction is holding, Linda said. Brandon's attorney filed an emergency motion to dissolve it at 6 a.m. Judge Hernandez denied it within the hour. He's not getting his board meeting. What's Brandon doing? From what I hear, losing his mind. His lawyer, Steve Pemberton, you know him? I've met him. Corporate guy. Slick. Slick, but not sharp. He's a deal lawyer, not a litigation lawyer. He's out of his depth, and he knows it. He filed the motion with 2 typos and a missing exhibit. Judge Hernandez was not impressed. Linda paused. But Jennifer, listen, Brandon is going to escalate. Men like him, when they lose control of the process, they try to control the people. Expect pressure. Expect manipulation. Expect him to show up at your door with tears in his eyes and a speech about how you're destroying the family legacy. She was right. He showed up at noon. I was in the living room on a conference call with Tom Brennan, going over the company's Q4 financials, when I heard the key in the lock. The door opened and Brandon walked in. Not with tears, not with a speech, but with Ashley. He brought her to my apartment. Our apartment. The apartment where we'd adopted Otis, where we'd spent Sunday mornings with pancakes in the Tribune, where he'd told me he loved me 10,000 times. He brought her there. Ashley stood behind him in the foyer, wearing a cream-colored coat and that diamond ring, her eyes darting around the apartment like she was already redecorating it in her mind. Otis ran to Brandon, then sniffed Ashley's boots and backed away. Even the dog knew. We need to talk about this like adults, Brandon said. He used his CEO voice, calm, measured, the voice he used in board meetings when he wanted to sound like the smartest person in the room. I ended my call with Tom. Get her out of my home. Jennifer, Ashley is part of this conversation now. She's going to be what, Brandon? Your wife? You're still married to me. This is still my apartment, and she is trespassing. Ashley spoke for the first time. Jen, I know this is hard. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare call me Jen. Don't you dare stand in my living room with my husband's ring on your finger and tell me you know how this feels. You have no idea how this feels. You lied to your own father. You told Greg we were already separated. Ashley's face went white. She hadn't expected me to know that. That was a misunderstanding, she stammered. You were trying to make yourself the victim. You were trying to rewrite the story so you're the woman who fell in love, not the woman who slept with her stepsister's husband for a year while smiling in my face. Brandon stepped forward. Enough. Jennifer, here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop this trustee nonsense, release the injunction, and we're going to negotiate a fair divorce settlement. I'm offering you the apartment, your 10% shares, and $200,000 cash. That's generous, and you know it." I looked at him, really looked at him. The jaw I used to trace with my fingertip in bed, the brown eyes I'd called warm. There was nothing warm in them now. They were calculating, transactional. He was negotiating a deal, and I was the obstacle. "You're offering me $200,000, I said slowly, "for a company worth $14 million that I helped build, for 6 years of my life, for redesigning your brand, managing your finances, landing the contracts that doubled your revenue. $200,000. The company is the Calloway family legacy. It's not yours. The trust documents say otherwise." Something flickered in his eyes. Fear. Just a flash, but I saw it. "What are you talking about?" he said. "I think you should ask your lawyer," I said, "the one who files motions with typos." Brandon's jaw tightened. He grabbed Ashley's arm. Too hard, I noticed. She winced and pulled her toward the door. "You're making a mistake, Jennifer, a huge mistake. I built that company. Your father built that company, and your father made me trustee. Not you, me." The door slammed. Otis flinched. I stood there in the silence, heart hammering, hands shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the electric, terrifying thrill of watching a man realize he's lost control of the thing he thought he owned. I called Linda. "He just left. He brought Ashley with him." "To your apartment?" "Yes." "Good. That's harassment. I'm filing for a protective order. And Jennifer, did he mention the trust?" He didn't know. I could see it on his face. He had no idea his father changed the trustee designation. "Then we still have the advantage. Here's what I need you to do today." What I did that day, and the 3 days that followed, was methodical, precise, and devastating. First, I formally invoked Section 14B of the Calloway Family Trust. The filing cited Brandon's extramarital affair with a company employee, conducted using company resources, culminating in a public marriage proposal at a company-funded event, all constituting material reputational harm to both the family name and the business. I attached the viral video, Karen Fisher's sworn statement, Brandon's corporate credit card records showing $43,000 in personal expenditures, and the email exchange between Brandon and Ashley. Linda filed it with the Cook County Probate Court on Wednesday afternoon. Second, I exercised my authority as trustee to freeze all distributions from the trust pending review. This meant Brandon's quarterly trust income, roughly $180,000 a year, stopped immediately. His personal accounts were funded almost entirely by trust distributions and his CEO's salary. Without the distributions, he was operating on salary alone. A good salary, $275,000, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle he'd built, especially not with a new fiancée who'd developed expensive taste on his dime. Third, I contacted every vendor associated with the December 14th rooftop party and confirmed the cancellation of all charges. The event coordinator at the Langford Hotel had already processed my request from Friday night, but there were outstanding invoices from the caterer, the DJ, the photographer, and the ice sculpture company. Total outstanding, $23,400. I canceled every one. When the caterer called to ask why, I said simply, "The person who authorized those charges, me, is withdrawing authorization." The caterer, a woman named Diane, who'd worked with me on 3 previous Calloway events, said, "Honey, I saw the video. Consider it done." Fourth, and this was the move that changed everything, I called Richard Calloway. Brandon's father had been living in Scottsdale, Arizona since his retirement 18 months earlier. Semi-retired, technically. He still took calls, still reviewed quarterly reports, still called Tom Brennan once a month to check on the numbers. But he'd stepped back from daily operations entirely, on doctor's orders after the second heart attack. I hadn't spoken to Richard since Thanksgiving, 3 weeks before the party. He'd called to wish us happy holidays. Brandon had taken the call in the other room. Now I dialed his number and waited. "Jennifer?" Richard's voice was gravelly, older than I remembered. I've been hoping you'd call. You saw the video. Tom sent it to me Saturday morning. I've watched it once. That was enough. A long pause. Heavy breathing. He was on supplemental oxygen some days, Brandon had mentioned. I'm ashamed of my son, Jennifer. I want you to know that. Richard, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you respond. I told him everything, the affair, the emails, the $43,000 in company funds, the emergency board meeting Brandon had tried to call, the share restructuring designed to strip my ownership, and finally, the trust. You made me successor trustee, I said. I've invoked the morality clause. The silence on the other end lasted so long, I checked to make sure the call was still connected. Good, Richard said finally. His voice cracked on the word. That's exactly why I put you there, Jennifer, because I knew, God help me, I knew, that boy would burn it all down if someone didn't hold the matches. Richard, the morality clause allows me to redistribute Brandon's 30% trust shares. If I do that, if I move those shares out of his name and into the trust's general pool, which I control as trustee, he loses his ownership stake. Combined with my personal 10%, I'd have effective control of 70% of the company. I know what it means. I wrote the trust. I'm asking for your blessing. Another silence. Then, you don't need my blessing, Jennifer. You need my testimony, and you have it. I'll sign a sworn affidavit stating that I designated you as trustee specifically because I had concerns about Brandon's judgment and character. My lawyer in Scottsdale can have it notarized by tomorrow. I pressed my hand over my mouth. My eyes burned. Richard, don't thank me. Just save my company. That's all I ask. Thursday morning, Linda filed the redistribution motion. Brandon's 30% trust shares were to be transferred into the trust's general pool, administered by me as successor trustee. With the affidavit from Richard, the corporate credit card evidence, Karen's statement, and the viral video viewed now by over 2 million people, the filing was ironclad. Brandon's lawyer, Steve Pemberton, filed an objection within hours. His argument? The morality clause was archaic. The trustee designation was made under duress during Richard's health crisis, and Jennifer Hadley Calloway had a personal vendetta that disqualified her from serving as trustee. Judge Hernandez scheduled a hearing for the following Tuesday, 6 days away. On Friday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Jennifer. It was Ashley. Her voice was small, stripped of its usual brightness. Please don't hang up. I should have hung up. I didn't. Brandon doesn't know I'm calling, she said. He'd be furious. But I need you to understand, I never meant for any of this to happen. I fell in love. I couldn't help it. You could have quit your job. You could have told me. You could have done literally anything other than what you did. I know that now. But Jennifer, he told me you were unhappy too. He said the marriage was over, that you were staying together for appearances. He said you didn't love him anymore. And you believed him. My stepsister, who's known me since I was 14, believed a man she'd known for 2 years over a lifetime of... My voice broke. I steadied it. Did you know about the board meeting? The share restructuring? Silence. Ashley, did you know he was planning to take my shares? He said it was just corporate reorganization. He said you'd agreed to it. Like I'd agreed to the separation? Like I was okay with all of it? How many lies did you need to believe before the story made sense? She was crying now. I could hear it, wet, ragged breaths. Part of me wanted to comfort her, the way I'd comforted her when she failed her real estate exam, when her cat Duchess got sick, when she called me crying from that studio apartment in Schaumburg. That instinct was still there, buried under everything, and I hated it. I'm going to ask you one question, I said, and your answer will determine what happens next. Are you willing to testify, in court, under oath, about what Brandon told you? About the lies he used to justify this affair? About his plans for the company? The longest pause of my life. He'll destroy me, Ashley whispered. He's already destroying you. He just hasn't finished yet. The line went quiet. Then, so softly I almost missed it, "Tell me when and where." I hung up and stared at my phone. My hands were trembling. Tuesday's hearing was 4 days away, and I now had something Brandon never saw coming: his own fiancée ready to turn witness. The weekend before the hearing was the quietest 4 days of my life. I didn't leave the apartment. I ordered groceries through Instacart, walked Otis around the block at 6 a.m. when nobody was outside, and spent every other waking hour at the kitchen island with Linda on speakerphone, preparing. Ashley came to my apartment on Saturday, alone. No cream-colored coat this time. She wore jeans and a hoodie and no makeup, and she looked like the 26-year-old girl who'd called me crying from Schaumburg. She sat on my couch, and Otis put his head in her lap, and I hated that he did that, but I didn't stop him. "I need to know everything," I said, "from the beginning. When it started, how it started, what he told you, what he promised you, all of it." She talked for 3 hours. I recorded every word on my phone, with her permission, while Linda's paralegal took notes on a laptop at the dining table. The affair started 11 months before the party, not during the Lake Geneva retreat, but 2 weeks after it. Brandon had texted Ashley late one night, "I can't stop thinking about you," and she'd texted back. It escalated fast. Hotels during lunch breaks, his corporate card for everything. He told Ashley that our marriage was dead, that I was cold and controlling, that I'd trapped him into working at his father's company. He told her he was going to leave me after the holidays and that they'd start fresh together. "He said you didn't love him," Ashley said, her voice raw. "He said you only cared about the company, that you married him for the business." I stared at her. "And you believed that, despite knowing me for 17 years? She looked at her hands. The diamond ring was gone. I noticed its absence like a missing tooth. "He was convincing, Jennifer. He cried. He actually cried and told me he was lonely and that I was the first person who'd made him feel alive in years." She wiped her eyes. "I know that sounds pathetic. I know it doesn't excuse anything. But I need you to understand that I didn't set out to destroy your life. But you did." She nodded. No argument, no defense, just a nod. "The proposal," I said. "Whose idea was it?" "His. Completely his. He planned it for weeks. He told me the party was the perfect moment because all the important people would be there. Clients, board members, employees. He said it would establish us as a couple publicly, so nobody could question it later. He said you were in Phoenix and would never know until he'd already told you himself." I thought about that. Brandon hadn't proposed to Ashley because he was swept up in passion. He'd proposed at a company event, in front of company employees and clients, as a strategic move, a power play, a public coronation of the new queen, designed to make the transition seem inevitable before I could object. "One more question," I said. "The board meeting, the share restructuring. Did he tell you about that?" Ashley hesitated. Then, "He said he needed to clean up the corporate structure before the divorce. He said it was routine." "Did he tell you he was planning to strip my ownership?" "No, but his lawyer did. I overheard a phone call on Thursday night. Steve Pemberton told Brandon that if they could get the restructuring approved before you filed any legal action, your shares would be," his word was, "neutralized." Brandon laughed and said, "She won't even know what happened until it's over." Linda's paralegal stopped typing and looked at me. I looked at Linda's name on my phone screen. "Did you get that?" I asked. "Every word," Linda said. "We're ready." Tuesday, December 24th, Christmas Eve. Judge Hernandez's courtroom, Cook County Probate Division. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:15 in a black suit I'd bought specifically for this day. No jewelry, no wedding ring, hair pulled back. Linda walked beside me carrying 2 banker's boxes of evidence. Brandon was already there with Steve Pemberton. He wore a charcoal suit and the expression of a man who still believed he was going to win. Ashley was not with him. He didn't know yet that she was in a witness room down the hall. The courtroom was small, no jury, just Judge Hernandez, the attorneys, a court reporter, and 3 people in the gallery. Tom Brennan, Karen Fisher, and a woman I didn't recognize who turned out to be a reporter from the Chicago Business Journal. Steve Pemberton went first. His argument was simple. The morality clause was outdated. The trustee designation was improper because Richard had been in poor health when he signed it, and I had a personal conflict of interest that should disqualify me from serving as trustee. Linda dismantled him in 11 minutes. She presented Richard's sworn affidavit, notarized in Scottsdale, stating he was of sound mind when he amended the trust and that he'd specifically chosen me because, his words, Jennifer has demonstrated more integrity and business acumen than any Calloway by blood, including myself. She presented the medical records showing Richard was lucid and ambulatory at the time of the amendment. She presented the corporate credit card records, $43,000 in personal charges. The email exchange. Karen Fisher's sworn statement. Then she played the video. The courtroom had a screen mounted on the wall. Linda connected her laptop and pressed play. The rooftop, the skyline, Brandon on one knee, Ashley's hands over her mouth, the crowd cheering, my champagne being poured. 2 minutes and 14 seconds of my husband proposing to another woman at an event funded entirely by me, his legal wife. Brandon watched the screen with his jaw clenched. He didn't look at me. Your Honor, Linda said, this isn't a gray area. Mr. Calloway conducted a year-long affair with a company employee, his wife's stepsister, using company funds. He then staged a public marriage proposal at a corporate event attended by clients, board members, and employees, an event organized and paid for by Mrs. Hadley Calloway. The reputational harm to both the family and the business is not theoretical. It's on 2 million phones. Judge Hernandez turned to Pemberton. Counselor, do you have a response? Pemberton stood. Your Honor, the respondent's personal life, while regrettable, does not constitute— I have one more witness, Linda interrupted. The court's indulgence for 5 minutes. The door opened. Ashley walked in. Brandon's face went white. Not pale, white, like every drop of blood had been vacuumed out of him. He half stood from his chair, and Pemberton grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. Ashley took the stand. She was shaking. Her voice trembled when she was sworn in, but she looked at the judge, not at Brandon, and she spoke clearly. She confirmed the affair. She confirmed the timeline. She confirmed that Brandon had used company resources, the corporate card, the company car, conference rooms after hours. She confirmed that he'd told her the marriage was already over, that Jennifer had agreed to a separation, that everything was consensual and above board. And was any of that true? Linda asked. No, Ashley said. None of it was true. Jennifer didn't know. She found out at the party, like everyone else. One final question, Ms. Hadley. Did you overhear a conversation between Mr. Calloway and his attorney regarding the proposed share restructuring? Yes, I heard his lawyer say that if they got the restructuring approved before Jennifer took legal action, her shares would be— the word was neutralized. And Brandon laughed and said she wouldn't know what happened until it was over. The courtroom went silent. Brandon was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were yellow. He leaned toward Pemberton and whispered something furious. Pemberton shook his head. Judge Hernandez removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Then he spoke. I've heard enough. The trustee's invocation of Section 14B is sustained. The evidence of material reputational harm is overwhelming and, frankly, uncontested by anything resembling a credible defense. Mr. Calloway's 30% trust-allocated shares are hereby transferred to the trust's general pool under the administration of the successor trustee, Jennifer Hadley Calloway. The injunction against corporate restructuring remains in effect permanently. Additionally, I'm referring the matter of misused corporate funds to the appropriate authorities for review. He looked directly at Brandon. Mr. Calloway, you are entitled to retain your position as CEO at the discretion of the board, but I'd suggest you consult a better attorney before your next move. The gavel came down. Brandon didn't move, didn't speak, didn't look at me. I stood, gathered my coat, and walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Tom Brennan was waiting. He shook my hand, firmly, both hands, the way Richard used to, and said, "The board meets Friday. We'd like to discuss leadership transition, if you're interested." "I'm interested," I said. Karen Fisher hugged me. No words, just a hug that lasted 10 seconds and said everything. I walked out of the courthouse into the December air. It was snowing, soft, lazy flakes drifting through the pale morning light. Christmas Eve in Chicago. Somewhere across the city, Brandon was sitting in a courtroom realizing he'd lost everything he thought he owned. Somewhere in a witness room, Ashley was crying and calling her father. Somewhere in Scottsdale, Richard Calloway was waiting by his phone. I called him from the courthouse steps. "It's done," I said. Richard exhaled, a long, shaking breath that carried 18 months of worry. "Merry Christmas, Jennifer." The divorce was finalized in March. I kept the apartment, my 10% personal shares, and my role as trustee controlling the 60% trust pool. Brandon kept his 401k and whatever was left in his personal accounts after legal fees. The $200,000 he'd offered me as a settlement became the amount he owed in restitution for misused corporate funds. Poetic, in a way. He resigned as CEO in January, before the board could fire him. Last I heard, he'd moved to Austin and was consulting for a small shipping company. Ashley moved back to Schaumburg. We haven't spoken since the hearing. My mother and Greg are still married. That surprised me. Greg called me on Christmas Day and apologized for 20 minutes straight, and I told him it wasn't his fault, because it wasn't. He's a good man who raised a daughter who made a terrible choice. That's not the same thing as being responsible for it. I became interim CEO of Callaway Freight Solutions in February. The board made it permanent in June. Revenue was up 12% by year-end. I hired a new executive assistant, a woman named Patricia, 53 years old, no nonsense, reminds me of Karen. She organizes the holiday party now. I still pick the napkin color. Otis sleeps on the bed, the whole bed, because there's nobody else in it, and some nights that's lonely, and some nights it's the most peaceful thing in the world. People ask me if I'm angry. The answer is complicated. I was angry. Volcanic, white-hot, shaking hands angry for about 3 months. Then the anger cooled into something harder and quieter, like volcanic rock. It's still there, it just doesn't burn anymore. What I feel now mostly is clarity. I built something real, not just the company, though I built that too, more than Brandon ever acknowledged. I built a life where the things I own are actually mine, where the people around me have earned their place, where nobody is smiling at me over a bonfire while lying to my face. Last week, I was at the office late, reviewing contracts, and I looked up at the wall where I'd once hung Brandon's Chicago Business Journal profile. It's gone now. In its place is the original framed invoice from the wine shop on Madison Avenue. 47 bottles of Dom Perignon, $215 each. I keep it there as a reminder. You can buy the most expensive champagne in the world. You can pour it into crystal glasses at a party you plan down to the napkin color. But if you're toasting to a lie, it all tastes like vinegar. And if someone hands you a glass at your own funeral, you don't have to drink it. You can set it down, walk out, and build the whole damn table yourself.